The snow falls thick and soft, smothering the wire fences and the muddy ground. It is December 1944, and the air smells sharp with frost and faint smoke from distant fires. Every gust carries a whisper of despair, footsteps crunching over ice, the hollow sound of boots on frozen mud. Inside the barbed labyrinth of the POW camp, the prisoners huddle in ragged coats, breath misting in short, anxious puffs. Each man is a shadow of himself, lean faces, hollow eyes, hands trembling not from cold, but from the expectation of what cruelty this day may hold. Klaus rubs his hands together, shivering beneath the grey wool of a coat that has seen better winters. His eyes flick toward the wooden barracks, the lines of men waiting silently for the roll call, for the inspection, for whatever humiliation is customary. A thin line of smoke curls from the chimneys. Someone is trying to warm a small fire. The smell of wet wood mixes with the acrid stench of unwashed bodies. Klaus thinks of home, a tiny apartment in Berlin, the faint smell of cinnamon from his mother's Christmas bread. He swallows hard. That warmth is distant, perhaps gone forever. Another Christmas, murmurs Johann beside him, voice barely more than a breath. Nothing, nothing but cold. His words hang in the air, brittle as ice. The others nod quietly, faces drawn, not daring to hope. Hope has killed men before. The rumor that reaches them is a cruel jest, whispered from man to man. No Red Cross packages this year, no extra bread, no candles. Just the cold, just the camp, just the quiet misery. The camp feels suspended between worlds. Outside, the forest is white, untouched, serene. Inside, the fences loom like dark teeth, barbed and unforgiving. The men glance at each other with the same silent question. Will today be like any other day? The guards, in their crisp jackets, stride past with boots that echo on the hard, packed snow. Their faces are indifferent, unreadable. Klaus watches one guard drop a small tin onto the snowy path. He frowns. It seems trivial, yet something about the gesture is off, unexpected. A glimmer of motion, a fragment of humanity that feels alien. He shifts, fingers curling around the edges of his coat. The other prisoners notice it too, a subtle disturbance in the rhythm of routine, like a pause in a song they've memorized. In the barracks, the men huddle closer, whispering about food, warmth, rumors of kindness. They have steeled themselves for cruelty. It is a familiar companion, one that has been at their side since the moment they were captured. The inevitability of hunger, the inevitability of mockery, the inevitability of cold hands gripping them while fear gnaws from the inside. But today, the air tastes different. There is something electric under the smell of frost, a faint crackle of the unexpected. A loaf of bread arrives on a wooden tray, its crust golden, almost blinding in its perfection. The men blink. Johann hesitates, staring at it like it might vanish if he reaches. Bread, real bread. It smells of yeast, of warmth, of ovens far from this frozen prison. The hands of the men tremble, not with the cold, but with disbelief. Klaus dares a small step forward, then another. He reaches for the loaf, and the crust is firm under his fingers, soft within. A gasp escapes him, muffled, but enough for Johann to laugh. A short, dry bark of incredulity. Around them, others tentatively step closer, the shuffling of feet on snow marking a strange rhythm, a beat that feels like hope, but is dangerous to name aloud. The guards watch, silently, unhurried, faces still unreadable. Their discipline is absolute, yet the tension is in the air. They know something is happening that these men were never taught to anticipate. For some prisoners, the shock is almost unbearable. The quiet civility, the simple offering of bread, has unsettled a lifetime of fear and suspicion. It is as if the world has tilted slightly, revealing a possibility they thought had been erased. That not all enemies are monsters, that not all days are spent in misery. Klaus tears a piece of the bread, the warmth of it pressing against his frozen fingers. He closes his eyes and inhales deeply, tasting something almost forbidden, comfort. The men exchange glances, silent conversations written in the widening of eyes, the twitch of lips, the unsteady nods. They have expected nothing, and yet, here it is. A simple kindness, defiant against the cold and the years of indoctrination, seeping slowly into their bones. Outside, the snow continues to fall, each flake a whisper of what might come. Inside, hearts pound in cautious rhythm. The day is just beginning, and the camp feels, for the first time in a long time, alive. The greatest fear has always been cruelty, but now, perhaps, the greatest shock is the opposite. The journey to this moment had been long and measured by hunger, fear, and the rhythm of endless marches. Months before, they were soldiers in a war that seemed infinite, yet within days they became prisoners, shadows of men, stripped of authority, dignity, and even the hope of small comforts. Each day blurred into the next, muddy boots, bitter cold, the sharp tang of sweat, mixed with the metallic odor of barbed wire. Klaus remembers the first night of captivity as if it were etched on the back of his eyelids. The air had been heavy with smoke and gunpowder, his stomach clenched by fear. They had been herded from a frozen field into a wooden barrack, the boards rough under his fingers as he collapsed onto the hard floor. Around him, others groaned, whispered, and cried. Somewhere outside, a guard barked orders in English. The language was alien, harsh. Their own voices, speaking German, felt like a secret that belonged only to them now. Propaganda had prepared them for this moment, or so they thought. Every story, every leaflet, every whispered warning had painted their captors as monsters. Americans were cruel, unfeeling, always hungry for humiliation. "They take everything," said Johann, his hands clenching the small wooden cross he had brought from home. Every ounce of pride, every memory of home. Yet the reality had been more subtle, more disorienting. The barracks smelled faintly of pine from the washing of floors and of soap, a sterile sweetness that made the nostrils ache. Blankets were distributed, thin but sufficient. Bread arrived at regular intervals, the crust hard yet comforting in its dependability. At first, the men had been suspicious, poking at the rations as if expecting them to hide something cruel, something poisoned. They glanced at the guards, trying to read the expressions beneath the stiff caps, the dark jackets, the boots that marched without hesitation. Klaus recalls whispering to Johann one night, the words trembling in his mouth, "Why? Why do they feed us? Why do they even bother?" Johann shrugged, face pale in the flickering lantern light. "Maybe they're trying to make us better, or maybe it is another trick. One day we'll understand." Their journey to this understanding is measured not just in days, but in subtle revelations. Each meal, each blanket, each careful word from a guard is a small shock against the well. Drilled fear inside them. They had imagined suffering so complete it would strip men of reason. Yet here, in the careful orderliness of this camp, there is a strange consistency, a rhythm almost comforting. Klaus remembers the first inspection. The guards walked past in silence, eyes sharp, yet they offered no insult, no taunt. He shivered, not from fear but from disbelief. The men around him shifted uneasily, some laughed quietly, others stared at the ground, unsure how to feel. It is a journey not only of the body but of the mind, a slow unspooling of the mental chains forged by years of fear and propaganda. At night, when the men are left to their own thoughts, the contrast becomes unbearable. The cold presses against the thin boards, yet the blankets are dry and warm. Food is scarce in their memories of home. Every letter from Germany recounts hunger, rationing, the hollow emptiness of cupboards. Here a warm meal waits. Here there is soap to wash, water to drink, beds to sleep on. The irony is almost painful. Gratitude and shame collide, each bite of bread reminding them of what their families endure back home. Klaus writes in a small notebook, borrowed from a fellow prisoner, December 21, 1944, "We are fed, we are warm, it feels like a trick. Johann says to trust nothing, but how can I not feel it? Every bone aches from disbelief." I look at the guards' faces and I see no cruelty, no malice, only normalcy. Is normalcy cruelty, or is cruelty normal? I do not understand. The journey through captivity is punctuated by small acts that ripple outward in ways they cannot yet fully comprehend. A guard passes with a tray of fruit, carefully sliced apples glinting in the dim light. Another silently adjusts the blanket of a shivering man. Each gesture seems designed to confuse, to destabilize their expectations of suffering. The men begin to talk in whispers, as if admitting these observations aloud might summon punishment. They speak of bread, of blankets, of warmth, their voices tentative, disbelief threading each word. "It's too much," murmurs Johann one night, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, hands tightening around the worn wooden cross. "We are supposed to starve. We are supposed to." He swallows hard, cuts himself off. Words fail, and yet the snow outside mirrors the inner transformation. Blank, cold, seemingly uniform, yet each flake distinct, individual. Each act of kindness, each measure of warmth, lands like a snowflake on their heart, soft at first, then accumulating, heavy with weight, impossible to ignore. The journey through captivity is no longer linear. It is a layering of surprises, a slow shattering of the mental structures built to endure cruelty. In the barracks, Klaus catches sight of a small bar of soap on the wooden shelf. He lifts it, smells it, and the simple fragrance, clean, floral, faintly sweet, makes him inhale sharply. How can such a small thing carry so much meaning? His fingers trace the edges, smooth and solid, and for a moment the world outside fades. There is only warmth, only the faint hope that perhaps there is something beyond hunger, beyond fear. This is the journey from rigid expectation of cruelty to the fragile edge of trust. Every meal, every gesture, every small touch of normal life is a step toward understanding that the world may hold a different truth than the one they were taught. It is a slow, deliberate unraveling, unsettling in its quiet persistence. And as the men huddle together in the barracks that evening, looking at each other with wary eyes, Klaus thinks, perhaps the journey is not to America, not to freedom, but to a new understanding of what it means to be human. The morning dawns pale and fragile, light brushing the tops of snow-laden trees. Klaus and the others shuffle toward the mess hall, their breath fogging in the cold, boots crunching over ice that refuses to crack. The air is heavy with anticipation, though none dare speak it aloud. In the barracks, the whispers of hope have grown, small embers that threaten to ignite the imagination. But the men are wary. They have been prepared for suffering, for hunger, for humiliation. What they are about to receive defies every lesson they have been taught. The mess hall doors open and the prisoners step inside. The smell hits them first, warm, fragrant, almost sinful in its richness. Fresh bread, thick and golden, the tang of roasted meat, creamy soups that shimmer with butter and herbs. Tables lined with silver trays gleam under lantern light. For a moment, no one moves. The room is silent except for the crackle of the fire in the hearth, a sound so ordinary yet profoundly alien. Johann's mouth hangs open. It smells like... He cannot finish. The words betray him. Around him, men glance at each other, unsure if they are dreaming or awake. The guards stand at the edges of the room, their presence quiet, watchful, yet not menacing. They nod almost imperceptibly toward the trays. "Eat," one says simply in English with no malice, no tone of command that implies cruelty. Klaus steps forward, hands trembling. The warmth of the tray presses against his palms as he lifts a bowl of soup. The steam rises, curling around his face. He closes his eyes, inhaling deeply. It is unlike anything he has known in months or years. The flavor, when he dares a cautious taste, is rich, comforting, almost sinful in its abundance. His throat tightens. Tears sting the corners of his eyes, unbidden, uncontrolled. Around him, the men react differently. Some tremble with disbelief, laughing nervously as if the sound can anchor them to reality. Others sit stiffly, staring at the food as though touching it would shatter the fragile spell. A few quietly weep, heads bowed over their bowls, mourning the hunger and the loss that brought them here, even as they taste warmth for the first time in what feels like eternity. A small act of humanity shifts the room further. One guard places a tin of sugar beside a young prisoner who had hesitated, too wary to move. The prisoner freezes, eyes wide. The guard does not speak, does not look at him again. It is not punishment, it is not a test, it is simply kindness. The men are unprepared, their hearts race, their minds struggle to reconcile this with every lesson drilled into them since childhood. The enemy is cruel, the enemy is merciless, the enemy is everything they fear. Klaus sits beside Johann, his hands still wrapped around the bowl. Why, he whispers, why are they doing this? Johann shakes his head, voice hoarse. I don't know, I cannot. He cuts himself off, gaze flitting to the guard standing silently nearby. I cannot understand it. The shock does not end with food. In the corner of the hall, a small stack of books rests on a wooden table. Novels, history, poetry. A guard gestures toward them. Read, he says. No one moves at first. Then one prisoner timidly reaches for a book. His fingers brush the spine, smooth and clean, and he opens it. The words are foreign yet comforting, ordinary yet miraculous. The smell of ink and paper mingles with the aroma of soup and bread, an intoxicating perfume that presses against every nerve. Outside the windows, sunlight glints off snow, the world unchanged in appearance, yet transformed in meaning. The men glance at the trees, the fences, the distant hills. They have expected despair, yet here is abundance. They have expected derision, yet here is respect, quiet and unwavering. Their bodies, accustomed to the constant alertness of hunger, tense and relax in confusion. Their minds, armored with suspicion, begin to crack, revealing raw, unprotected vulnerability beneath. Klaus notices a small bar of soap on the counter, placed carefully beside a towel. He lifts it, weighs it in his hand. The smoothness, the floral scent, the sheer ordinariness of it overwhelms him. It is absurd, trivial, but in this context it is profound. It is a declaration: you are human, you are worthy, you are not forgotten. Whispers ripple through the hall. Men speak softly to each other, half-formed thoughts. I don't deserve this, murmurs one. Another says, voice trembling, it is too much. They clutch their coats, their hats, their bowls. Each object becomes a talisman, an anchor to the reality that seems almost too bright, too normal, too generous. By the time the first meal is finished, a transformation has begun. The prisoners move differently, speak differently, breathe differently. The guards watch, expressionless yet patient, allowing the shock to settle, to seep into the marrow. The prisoners had arrived expecting nothing, bracing themselves for cruelty. Instead, they are met with abundance, respect, and the quiet insistence of normalcy. Klaus sits back, looking around the hall. He thinks of home, of Berlin, of families shivering in empty rooms while he eats in warmth. Guilt presses against him, sharp and immediate. Gratitude blooms alongside it, confusing and heavy. He wonders, is this kindness, or is it a weapon more powerful than any bullet? And yet, as he gazes at the steaming bowls, the clean tables, the small acts of care, he begins to understand. Some shocks cannot be anticipated. Some truths cannot be taught. They must be experienced. The greatest cruelty, he realizes, has not been inflicted upon them by their captors. It has been inflicted upon them by expectation itself, the conditioning of fear, the assumption of malice, the preparation for suffering. And the greatest shock of all is to have that expectation undone, not violently, but tenderly, inexorably, irrevocably. This is part 3-800 words. Next, I can move to part 4, Daily Revelations 15-25 min, breaking it into 3-4 subsections focusing on food, dignity, contrasts, and internal conflict. Should I proceed with part 4? You said, next in 800 word, ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here's part 4, Daily Revelations 15-25 min, 800 words, continuing the immersive cinematic novelistic style. Part 4, Daily Revelations 15-25 min. The days unfold slowly, each one a study in contradictions. The men wake to the clatter of trays and the soft murmur of English commands, a rhythm so ordinary yet astonishing. Klaus sits at the edge of the table, tracing the rim of his bowl, listening to the others. He notices that their faces are changing, not in the hard lines of youth lost to war, but in the subtle easing of tension, the softening of eyes. Food dominates these revelations: bread, dense and warm, buttered with care. Soup, rich with vegetables and meat, a taste so foreign it almost makes them laugh. Klaus remembers the hollow pangs of hunger at home in Germany, the thin rations that left stomachs aching and spirits brittle. Here, abundance is quiet, almost casual. He can take as much as he desires, and no one will scold, no one will judge. Each bite is a revelation, a shock that produces both gratitude and guilt. Johann whispers across the table, voice trembling, "I cannot believe it. Every day we eat, and I think of my brother in Berlin. He is starving. How can I enjoy this?" His eyes glisten as he speaks. Klaus nods, swallowing, heart heavy. Every morsel is a reminder of absence, of ruin, yet also of survival. The men begin to notice the smaller things: clean blankets, warm water, soap that lathers thick and fragrant. Each detail is a symbol, a declaration that they are not merely prisoners. They are human beings deserving of care. Klaus picks up a bar of soap, inhaling its faint floral scent. He closes his eyes, allowing the simple act of washing to anchor him in a world that seems increasingly impossible. Clean, abundant, kind, the guards' quiet respect reinforces the shock. They do not mock. They do not demand. They nod, they gesture, they carry trays with patience and precision. One guard, noticing a trembling prisoner struggling to lift a plate, adjusts it for him silently. The gesture is so ordinary that it should be forgettable, but in the context of months spent anticipating cruelty, it is revolutionary. The men begin to whisper among themselves, "Why? Why are they doing this?" The question hangs in the air, unanswerable, heavy. In the evenings, the barracks glow with lantern light. The men huddle together, sharing stories from home, stories they had feared would be lost forever. Letters arrive sporadically, each one a jolt of reality. They describe empty cupboards, the cold, the fear back in Germany. The contrast is unbearable: warmth, abundance, care here, scarcity, hunger, desperation there. Gratitude intertwines with guilt, a knot in the stomach that refuses to loosen. Klaus writes in his notebook again, December 23, 1944, bread, butter, soup, warm blankets, soap. I am alive in comfort while others starve. I feel shame and gratitude at once. Johann says this kindness is a weapon. Perhaps it is, but I feel it in my bones, in my chest, in the trembling of my hands. Can the enemy be good? Can the impossible be true? The men begin to test the boundaries of this kindness, tentatively at first. They pick up books left on shelves, novels, history, poetry. The pages smell of ink and promise. One prisoner runs a finger along the words, as though touching them might make the miracle disappear. Another opens a notebook, sketching, writing, whispering thoughts they had long stifled. Each act of creation is a quiet rebellion against expectation, an assertion of self within captivity. They also begin to notice the contrasts beyond the camp. Letters and conversations reveal the ruins in Germany: bombed streets, rationed bread, families broken and scattered. Here, in America, life seems intact, whole, almost impossible. They glimpse the gardens beyond the fences, trimmed and green, children playing quietly in snow, smoke rising from chimneys. The world outside is familiar yet alien, ordinary yet extraordinary. Each sight, each sound, each smell underscores the chasm between expectation and reality. Internal conflict grows alongside these revelations. Gratitude clashes with shame, hope with disbelief. They begin to question their previous convictions, the propaganda that shaped their understanding of the world. We are supposed to hate. Johann whispers late one night, we are supposed to fear, but I cannot, I feel something else. His hands tremble around a cup of tea, the steam curling into the cold air of the barracks. Klaus sees it too, the slow erosion of certainty. Each meal, each act of care, each small freedom chips away at the mental structures built for survival under cruelty. They were taught to expect malice, to anticipate suffering, to embrace cynicism as armor. But kindness is a more insidious force. It enters quietly, steadily, reshaping thought and feeling, destabilizing expectations. The men clutch small objects as talismans, a piece of bread, a bar of soap, a well-worn book. These are symbols of the world's new possibility. They whisper in the dark, half expecting the miracle to vanish if spoken aloud. Yet it endures. Each day reinforces it, layer upon layer, warmth, nourishment, dignity, respect. By the end of this cycle of revelation, the men sit in the barracks, huddled close, their minds full of questions. They have expected nothing and received everything. The world has tilted beneath their feet, revealing a reality they cannot reconcile with what they were taught. The conflict is internal, psychological, unavoidable. Gratitude versus guilt, hope versus fear, disbelief versus wonder. And Klaus realizes that this is the heart of their captivity. Not the fences, not the guards, not even the cold, but the confrontation with a truth that refuses to fit into the framework of their previous understanding. That humanity can exist even in the midst of war, that kindness can emerge from the very hands of those they were trained to fear. The days of abundance and quiet kindness begin to weigh heavily, though not in the way hunger or cold ever did. Klaus notices it first, a gnawing tension in the chest, a restless unease that lingers after meals, after blankets, after the warm soap-scented showers. It is the unexpected, an unfamiliar, disorienting psychological burden. How can this be real? How can those who were once enemies treat them with respect, with dignity, without malice? The mind resists understanding. Letters arrive more frequently now, thin envelopes bearing familiar handwriting. Klaus holds one in trembling hands, recognizing the hurried scrawl of his sister. She writes of bombed buildings, of long lines for bread, of nights spent in cellars to avoid the air raids. He reads, rereads, and folds the letter against his chest. Every word is a dagger of guilt. He is fed, clothed, warm, yet those he loves suffer. Gratitude turns sharp, twisting into shame, twisting further into anger, not at the men who care for him, but at the cruelty of circumstances, at the injustice of survival. Johann sits beside him, silent, a book of poetry open on his lap. He whispers, almost to himself, "I was taught they would hate us, that they would break us, yet I feel something else, confusion, fear, hope." His hands clutch the edges of the pages, trembling. Words that once held meaning now feel hollow, replaced by the strange clarity of experience. They were trained to see the world in binaries, friend or foe, cruel or kind, loyal or traitor. But now every boundary has blurred. The guards' quiet civility becomes its own kind of psychological warfare. They do not lecture, they do not preach, they do not boast of victory. They simply carry out acts of decency with methodical precision. Beds are made, trays are delivered, soap is placed just so. Each act is small, ordinary, but in the context of war and captivity, it becomes extraordinary, destabilizing. Klaus wonders over and over, is this a test? A trap? How can something so simple wield such power over the mind? In the evenings, the barracks hum with whispered conversations. Men debate morality, question ideology, dissect the lessons of propaganda that once shaped their understanding of the world. "We were taught to despise them," one says, voice tight. "We were told they were animals, yet they show us this." His hand sweeps over the room, gesturing toward the warmth, the bread, the small gestures of care. The others nod, reluctant, hesitant. Each man wrestles privately with the implications, the foundations of belief eroding under the weight of reality. Klaus writes again, hands shaking. December 27, 1944, I am torn between worlds. Here there is kindness, warmth, food, dignity. In Germany there is hunger, fear, ruin. My heart cannot hold both. I do not recognize myself anymore. I am a soldier, a son, a prisoner, yet I am also something else. What does it mean to be human when the world teaches cruelty and yet offers mercy? The erosion of propaganda is subtle but relentless. Every act of kindness contradicts the stories drilled into them since youth. Every warm meal, every unmocking gaze, every quiet smile chips away at fear, doubt, and learned hatred. They begin to question not only the enemy but themselves. Were they complicit in believing lies? Were they blind to truth? Could they reconcile the horror of their own world with the decency they now witness? A small group gathers by the fire one night, passing letters and maps, quietly debating. One man shakes his head, whispering, "It is too much. I cannot reconcile what I feel here with what I left behind. I am not who I thought I was." Another adds, voice trembling, "Perhaps we were trained to hate because we were afraid of being human. Perhaps we feared kindness because it demands change." The weight of identity begins to shift. Klaus feels it in his bones, a subtle quiver that grows stronger with each passing day. He recognizes the soldier, the captive, the son. And yet there is another version emerging, a man capable of gratitude, of awe, of reflection. The boundaries between enemy and ally, between cruelty and care, between expectation and reality, dissolve. This is not comfort. This is confrontation with self, with ideology, with truth. At night, Klaus stares out the window at the snow-covered barracks. The quiet beauty of the world outside, the soft crunch of boots, the glimmer of sunlight on frost, the smell of firewood, presses into him, and he shivers not from cold, but from the intensity of realization. Humanity is not binary. Morality is not a simple choice. The war has taught brutality, yet this camp teaches another lesson, that dignity can survive, even amidst destruction, that kindness can be revolutionary, that the greatest weapons are not guns, but empathy, patience, and quiet acts of care. By the time the day ends, the psychological conflict is palpable. Men clutch books, letters, object, anchors in a storm of revelation. They struggle to reconcile the abundance and decency around them with the chaos, hunger, and propaganda of the world they left behind. Some weep silently, others laugh nervously, but all feel it, a fracture in their understanding, a new awareness that refuses to be ignored. Klaus closes his eyes, heart heavy and light all at once, and thinks, the enemy is not what I was taught. Humanity is not what I expected, and who am I now? The day arrives with a quiet announcement carried on the crisp winter air. The prisoners will soon be returning home. The news spreads slowly through the barracks, whispered first, then spoken aloud. Klaus hears it from Johann, who is crouched over a small stove, warming a tin of tea. Their eyes meet, and no words are necessary. Relief pulses, yet it is tangled with a strange sorrow, a melancholy born not of fear but of revelation. The men move through the camp with tentative steps, touching objects they had come to cherish. Blankets folded neatly, trays left in careful alignment, soap bars resting in precise order. Each item is a relic of a kindness they had never expected, a civilization in miniature that has altered them profoundly. The thought of leaving it behind evokes a tension deeper than fear. Grief for the loss of this improbable sanctuary, gratitude for the rare humanity it revealed, guilt for the homes and families left in ruin. Klaus walks slowly past the mess hall, the steam from the fires curling around his boots. He sees Johann examining a book, tracing the lines of poetry with his fingers, memorizing the words as if to carry them like a talisman back to the devastated streets of Berlin. "I will not forget this," Johann whispers, "even when I am starving again, even when all is rubble. I will not forget that we were treated like men." The journey home begins, measured not only in miles, but in memory. Every step retraces the lessons of captivity, the paradoxes that have reshaped them. They remember bread that was warm, abundant, and freely given. They remember blankets that softened the cold, the faint smell of soap that lingered in their clothes, the quiet courtesy of men who should have been enemies. Each act of kindness reverberates in their minds, echoing against the propaganda that once defined them. On the train, Klaus stares out at the winter landscape, snow drifting over fields that are desolate yet beautiful. Letters from home lie folded in his coat pocket, reminders of hunger, of fear, of destruction. He runs his fingers over the paper, feeling the tension between worlds, the suffering behind him, the unexpected mercy before him. He wonders how to reconcile it all, how to carry this new understanding into the ruins of Germany. The psychological weight of what they have experienced is immense. Gratitude clashes with guilt, hope with despair, relief with the unbearable truth of loss. Klaus closes his eyes and sees the camp, the firelight dancing on wooden walls, the careful arrangement of blankets, the quiet gestures of guards who never sought acknowledgement. They had expected nothing and received everything. Yet the mind struggles to comprehend it, to categorize it, to make sense of a kindness that was so radical it unsettled their very identity. By the time they cross the border back into Germany, the world is already different for them. Ruined streets, bombed buildings, ration lines, cold and hunger, but the memory of decency persists. Each man carries it quietly, a private revolution of thought and emotion. They clutch letters, books, small objects, relics of a humanity that refused to vanish even in wartime. Klaus writes one final entry in his notebook, the pages trembling under his fingers. January 2, 1945. I do not recognize the man I was before this. I do not recognize the enemy I was taught to hate. They fed us, clothed us, treated us as human beings. We have been given more than sustenance. We have been given a mirror of what is possible. And yet we return to hunger, to ruin, to destruction. How does one carry this truth? How does one survive it and still remember? The barracks, the warmth, the quiet dignity, they exist now as memory, a fragile proof that even in the darkest times, humanity can persist. Klaus and Johann walk through the ruins of Berlin, and everything they see is fractured, shattered, but they carry within them the unbroken proof of another reality. One where decency and care can endure even when hatred seems total. They speak little, words feel insufficient. Instead, they touch the objects they have carried, books, letters, soap, even the memory of bread, and let the experience settle into their bones. The transformation is subtle but absolute. They have been reshaped not by suffering, not by cruelty, but by the shock of unexpected humanity. As they stand among the rubble, Klaus feels a strange duality, sorrow for what is lost, gratitude for what was given, and awe at the revelation of a truth too simple to ignore. The greatest cruelty, they realize, is not to be beaten or starved, but to be denied the recognition of one's humanity. The greatest gift, conversely, is the opposite, to be treated with decency when it was least expected, when it could shake the very foundation of belief. And as night falls over the broken city, Klaus whispers to Johann, almost to himself, "We were prisoners of expectation, and they freed us from it. Not with chains, not with threats, but with bread, with blankets, with kindness. That is the war I will never forget." The snow begins again, soft and silent, blanketing the world in white. It is cold, yes, but it is also beautiful, and in that quiet, in that improbable mercy, Klaus understands something profound. Even in the darkest winters of human history, light, fragile, simple, human, can endure. The story closes not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. Men return to a shattered world, yet they carry within them proof that humanity exists, even amidst the ruins. They have learned, in ways the mind cannot fully articulate, that the capacity for decency may be the most radical force of all.